Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to, really understanding what's going on without getting buried in information. Today, we're plunging right into the global mining industry. We're looking specifically at the very latest developments just from this past week, June 15th to the 21st, 2025. Now, we've done through a whole stack of sources for you, stuff like Skillings.net, the industry intelligence plus major global news. And our mission really is to pull out the key nuggets, maybe highlight some surprising bits, and just give you a clear picture of the mining world right now. We're talking geopolitics, environmental stuff, the works. So yeah, let's jump in. There's a lot to cover. Okay, let's start in Africa. There's been a pretty significant geopolitical shift, something that might make people, look twice. Mali. Right. What's the story with this new gold refinery project there? What does it actually mean for Mali? Independence? Alliances?
Yeah, this is really interesting. It came out June 19th. Mali held a groundbreaking ceremony for a really large-scale gold refinery. And the key thing here, it's got explicit backing from Russia. They're aiming high, too, planning to process up to 200 tons of gold a year.
200 tons? Wow.
Exactly. And look, this isn't just about building a refinery. It's a strategic move, a real chess move, you could say. It could fundamentally change things power-wise in West Africa. It challenges, existing alliances, and it means Mali gets more control over its own gold exports, right. Less reliance on foreign refineries.
Right. So it's about shifting that power balance, not just bricks and mortar, but sticking with Africa. Mali sounds like a step towards control, but elsewhere.
Yeah.
Well, it's much tougher. Sudan. The conflict there seems completely tangled up with its gold production. Is this just Sudan, or is this a pattern? High commodity prices making conflicts worse.
It's a really critical question. And fortunately, we have seen similar patterns before. Sudan's gold output actually soared, believe it or not, hit 80 tons in 2024.
Despite the war.
Despite the devastating civil war. And new reports from SwissEd, they show a really dire situation. Artisanal mining, informal trade, it's directly financing the rival factions.
So it's fueling the fire.
Directly fueling the fire, intensifying the conflict. And those high global gold prices, they're definitely playing a big role driving this illicit trade. It makes any international peace efforts just incredibly complicated. Shows how a good market friend, quote unquote, can have just terrible local impacts.
Yeah, absolutely devastating. Okay, let's shift gears. Across the Atlantic now to the Americas. Starting in Ecuador, there are some new mining inspection fees causing, quite a bit of noise. What's the tension there? Government versus industry.
That's exactly it. A classic kind of tug of war. Ecuador brought in these new inspection fees, and the reaction was immediate. Strong protests from companies. Salazar Resources was one mentioned. The industry's basically saying, hold on, this jeopardizes investor confidence.
Right. Makes projects less viable.
That's the argument. Less viable, harder to plan long term. So it's government needing revenue versus the industry wanting stability and, predictable costs.
Makes sense. Okay, so from regulatory fights in South America, let's look north, the U.S. Some big strategic moves happening there, especially around battery metals.
Yeah, this one's quite notable. Chevron, the energy giant.
Chevron, really?
Yep. Chevron formally announced it's getting into U.S. lithium production, and they're not the first big energy player either. ExxonMobil's in the game. Albemarle's obviously a major player. They're all working on building up these domestic battery supply chains.
So what does that really signal?
It signals, I think, a potential U.S. lithium. Well, renaissance might be too strong, but a major push. Reducing dependency on China, that's a huge part of it. It's more than just supply chains. It feels like a shift in industrial strategy. Securing critical stuff for national security, it could really reshape the whole global battery scene over time.
Wow. Chevron and lithium. That's a marker. But okay, building up domestic mining sounds good for supply chains, but what about the other side? Environmental impact, social impact, especially if it scales up fast.
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Scaling up any mining quickly brings challenges. You've got water use, land disruption, how you manage the waste. And socially, impacts on local communities, land rights, labor. It's a balancing act. The U.S. will need to push for these minerals, but also ensure, strong environmental and social rules are in place, especially as demand just keeps growing.
Right. That balance is key. Okay, let's pivot again over to Asia Pacific and Europe, starting with China. Some movement on environmental accountability.
Yeah, this is interesting. China has agreed to support a probe, a transnational one, looking into pollution in the Mekong River linked to mining.
Okay. Why now?
Well, it follows quite a bit of international backlash, pressure building up, and it's potentially really significant. This could set a precedent, for environmental accountability across all Chinese-backed mining projects overseas, not just in the Mekong. More transparency, more responsibility, potentially.
one to watch then. And staying with policy shifts, but moving to Europe. Sweden, a big reversal on uranium mining after 40 years.
A huge reversal. Sweden lifted its 40-year ban on mining uranium.
What's behind that?
It seems pretty clear. It signals a definite pivot towards nuclear energy playing a bigger role in their future energy plans. And, linked to that, a push for developing critical minerals locally. It really highlights these broader trends we're seeing across Europe: energy security, resource security, trying to rely less on imports.
Okay, so Sweden's opening up for uranium, but at the same time, there's pushback in the wider EU against new regulations. Sounds contradictory.
It does, doesn't it? But yeah, major mining companies in the EU, we're talking Rio Tinto, Vale, Glencore, the big ones, they're pushing back hard against new chemical safety rules, the RECH regulations.
Those are the big environmental and health protection rules, right?
Right, exactly. Comprehensive rules. And the companies are warning quite loudly that these rules could actually cripple Europe's strategy for critical minerals.
Oh, so?
Their argument is it will mean slower permitting processes, less investment coming in, and ultimately it could mean Europe becomes more dependent on China for these vital materials.
Which is the opposite of the goal.
Precisely. It undermines the whole push for resource security. So a real tension there between regulation and strategic goals.
Okay, so a lot of moving parts regionally. Let's pull back a bit. What about wider market trends? Anything interesting happening there, maybe somewhere unexpected?
Well, you might not think about it first, but mining lubricants, it's actually a pretty interesting market story.
Lubricants.
Yeah. The market is projected to grow quite a bit, maybe surpass $5.79 billion by 2032. What's driving it is equipment getting modernized, more underground mining happening, which needs specific types of lubricants. And within that, synthetic lubricants are really taking the lead, taking market share.
Huh. Who knew?
Oh,
The grease behind the scenes.
exactly. It just shows how every part of the industry is evolving, even the stuff that seems basic. Technology shifts everywhere.
It really does. Okay, finally then, let's look at some key commodity prices. Copper and lithium. What are they telling us? Are they moving together?
No, actually, kind of different stories there. Mixed signals. Lithium is still in that price correction phase we've been seeing for a while. Seems like the market's rebalancing after those really high peaks.
Okay, and copper.
Copper's holding up quite well. Seems buoyant. It's getting support from infrastructure spending happening around the world, and also surprisingly strong demand recovery coming out of China. More bullish than expected there.
Interesting. So two critical metals, two different paths right now.
Reflecting different demand and supply pictures, definitely.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive for the week, if you take a step back, what are the big themes emerging? I mean, we've clearly seen nations trying to assert more control, right? Resource sovereignty, Mali wanting its own refinery, Sweden changing its uranium policy.
Absolutely. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
And tied to that, the geopolitical maneuvering is obvious. Russia in Mali, the U.S. energy giants moving into lithium, the China factor always there. It's competition for influence, for resources.
Yeah. And then there's that constant tension, isn't there, between development and sustainability?
Definitely. The regulatory pressures in the EU, the pollution concerns in the Mekong, environmental and social issues are really shaping where investment goes or where it faces hurdles.
And finally, you mentioned with lubricants, but technology and innovation just keep pushing things forward. Battery metals are the obvious example, but it's happening across the board.
Right. Even in an industry as old as mining, innovation is key. It connects all these things, how we extract, how we process, how we manage the impacts. It's all intertwined with global power shifts and economic needs. It's reshaping the whole landscape.
So thinking about all that, all these different forces pulling and pushing, geopolitics, nationalism, environmental worries, market ups and downs.
Yeah.
Here's something for you, our listeners, to think about. How do you see the global mining industry actually navigating all these challenges, these complex, sometimes conflicting pressures over the next, say, 10 years? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.